Now, to put this ring on the bottom, and I'll turn these ones upside down so you can see a couple different examples. I want one of these kind of rings on the bottom here.
Wait, why? What's that? What is that thing, and why do you want it on there?
It's called a foot, and it's a foot to a pot, and it basically provides stability. If there was not a foot on that pot, it'd be round, and this thing would roll all over the place. Now, if you live in an environment where you're in the sand all the time, that might be a good idea, and you don't need a foot.
But the other thing a foot does is it kind of raises the pot up and gives it almost like a little pedestal to sit on.
That's true.
So it kind of frames the pot in some ways. You have the foot, then you have the lip on the top. You know, if those are nice and clean and crisp, those look good. The rest of the pot can be a little wonky, and it still makes sense. But that foot is pretty important. And also, if you're using it as a tea bowl, that foot is where you put your fingers on the bottom when you're drinking out of it.
Okay. So if I'm going to make a foot and put it on there, I'm going to roll out the approximate shape of a coil, the thickness of the coil that I want. And notice I'm doing it here on the moist part, because if I rolled clay out over here, look how the canvas is turning moist, and all that moisture is eventually coming out of the clay.
And then the clay gets dried out, and then when you bend it, it kind of cracks. It's just not as plastic anymore.
Yeah, it will not. If you do this
a bunch, but yeah. That's why this clay's pretty wet.
Yeah, it's pretty wet. I know it's going to take a while, Carl, but it's a fun thing to show them when it actually does. You can speed this up like crazy.
Yeah.
So this is simply a demo to show you how you can dry the clay out. See how it starts to crack? Yeah. Just stop that for a second. Stop, GoPro.
Well, I'll just speed it up.
Okay.
Or I'll cut it out of there.
Yeah.
You know, this has such a wide-angle lens that you really have to get close to make it fill the whole frame.
That's what Matt was saying, that it's not that.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, it works. There you go. Okay.
So now we're going to...
Yeah, all right.
Okay, so here is this, and I'm getting this close to the thickness of a coil that I want, but I'm rolling it out on a moist area so I do not dry it out too much. Now this other piece came right from here, but I did this for a while in order to dry it out, and the canvas became moist. Now if you look at this, you can see how nice and bending this is, and there's no cracks because this clay has a lot of moisture, and I'm going to be able to come here and make the foot the size that I want it to be. Now maybe I decide that's as big as I want it. Maybe I can set it over here and go like this. See how I cut down through both sides? And I take that away and that away, and I can set it up here and see what I want. To me, that's way too wide, so I'm going to need to make it narrower. So to make it narrower, I'm just going to simply put that over on the top, kind of inch in here a little bit, and maybe cut it again. Right? Now, this clay bends, and it's nice and plastic because I didn't let any of the moisture leave by working it too long. This other piece, I rolled out here, and all the moisture came out. And this bends, and watch what happens when I try to bend a piece of clay that is dried out.
Yeah. So once you get your clay to that point, what are you going to do with it? You're going to rehydrate it.
You have to
You're just not going to use it right now.
Right.
Yeah.
So you'll take all your bits and pieces, and you can put them in a bag and put a little bit of water in the bag.
Yeah.
And then make sure it's airtight and leave it outside somewhere where it's not going to accidentally drip on your stuff in your house. And overnight, it should re-moisten. So anyways, I get to this, and I'm looking over here, and I'm thinking, I still want that a little bit more refined and a little bit narrower, so I'm going to go like this. And I'm liking that, personally. I think that's okay, right? So I want that on there. Now, Carl, if I want this to stick on there, this together, can I just stick it together?
Yeah, just lick it.
Lick it?
No, don't do that.
Don't do that? Okay. Can I just put that on there?
You can just hope that it sticks. You just put it together with hope.
Yeah, you have almost no chance that it's going to actually stay there and go through the firing. You might actually push on it and it seems to stay and it doesn't fall off, but in the firing it will come right off. So, what do you need to do, Carl? How am I going to get there?
Score and slip.
Slip and score. And so, all I'm going to do is rough up one surface, and you make marks one direction and then you make them the other direction. What you do is you start creating a slip in place. Right?
I don't even know what a slip is. What's a slip?
Oh, a slip is liquid clay. Clay in liquid suspension. So clay has a bazillion names for the different types of clay. There's wet clay for working. There's slip, which is liquid clay. There's leather hard clay, which you can bend, but it's a lot firmer. There's bisqueware clay that's been fired once, right?
Okay, so slip is liquid clay, and what you just did is you scored the clay and you added water as you were scoring it. Scoring is another word for scratching. You're scratching the clay. Mm-hmm. And as you scratch the clay with water, you kind of made a little slurry, and then you just push those two pieces together.
Right.
And so now that slurry kind of goes into all those little scratchy cracks, and that's what attaches the clay together. It's kind of like welding.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so now Mark's making a little line, just so he has a mark to where he needs to score the pot. All right, back to putting the foot on the cup.
Okay, so I say before you make any real decisions, you want to look at something and see if it's got the proportions that you like. So if I put this here and I get down here and I really have a look at it sideways and I think, oh, is that what I want? And if it's not, if I want it to be narrower, then don't be afraid to go ahead and cut it a little bit more, make it narrower, and then get it the way you like it before you commit and fasten it to the pot. But I'm liking that, and I'm going to say, okay, that's good. So I'm going to draw a little line on both sides of the coil foot. And if you want anything to go exactly back where you had it, you can make a little line that goes all the way down, and see how that little line, I can match it back up, it keys it back in so I know exactly where I had it. That's especially if you have something with an irregular shape, but that's another trick later. Okay, so for now, I'm going to come in here, I'm going to score this, and this is in drawing. When you make hash marks, you make lines in one direction. So you can do that.
Could you use this thing too?
You can, if it's a big surface, but all those is going to be kind of hard to fit in there. It depends on whether or not you're going to have to be working on something smaller. I'm going to do the same thing here, make lines in one direction, just to get things started. Now that's not creating a slip in place yet. So what you need to do is add a little bit of moisture here, and you got to be careful. So I reached in there and I got the sponge, and I'm going to add just enough so that it goes into those cracks that I made, and do the same thing here. Now I'm going to do the opposite direction, and what it does is it's starting to loosen up that clay and create a slip, because I've added water into the cracks that were going one direction, and then I do it the other direction, and that in place starts to create a slip. We'll be doing this a little later with other projects where some people prepare a slip out of the same clay that they're using so that they can
just brush it on.
Brush the slip right on, it's like you have your cement sitting right next to you and you just add it. So this is how to make the slip in place. See how gooey that is, right? It's gooey and it's moist, and right now while it's still pretty moist, let me see if I can find, there's that key that I was going to put it on, and there's the other side, so I know I'm going to go right back where I had it, where I liked it, and I'm going to go on there. And now here's the trick with putting anything on so it sticks. Imagine that, go pan back, Carl. Okay, imagine this is the surface that was scored and that's the other surface that was scored. If I just set them in place, look at all those little holes in between my fingers, and I just set those in place. So there's a lot of little pockets in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just apply a little pressure. So the importance of scoring is not only scoring and creating a slip, but also pressure is important. So the last part of making sure something stays is that you also add a little pressure so that those do this.
So you're lightly pinching the foot and then you're pressing it down against the pot.
Right, and this is basically how to make anything connect with ceramics. That you're creating the two surfaces that you want to connect. You need to score both surfaces while the clay has moisture in it. And those two surfaces ideally should be the same water content. And then once you've scored both and attached them, you apply a little bit of pressure so that there's a fusion, basically like this. One side doesn't know where the other side ended and the other side begins. They think they're the same piece. And that's the point of attaching any two things with clay. All right, so that's a really crude start of a bowl, and we will refine it a little bit more later, but that's how to get started with a basic pinch pot that you eventually want to refine into a more elegant tea bowl.